Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, it is the end of a very turbulent year, and in fact, I was just wondering whether we should call this show Good Riddance to 2020 or There is Hope in 2021. So I think let's go with the optimistic one and look ahead and see what is happening next year in terms of what are the takeaways from 2020 that will spill on to 21. And of course, I'll be discussing the political angle really. Joining me on the panel is Veer Sangvi, former editor, columnist, and commentator. R. Jagannathan, he is the editorial director of Saraja. Dheeraj Nair, he is the chief economist at Vedanta and also formerly from the Niti Aayog. Kaveri Bamzai, former editor, commentator, and columnist. Jaggi, I'll begin with you. What are the takeaways really that you're going to see spilling on to next year? We've got three big elections coming up. We've had an election in times of COVID. Did COVID impact elections or not is another question. And of course, the personalities of the political people at play.
Yeah, I'm a little pessimistic. If you look at the timeline of this year, you have started early with the CAA protests, then you had COVID, then you had an economic collapse, a Chinese aggression, an economic revival of sorts, a COVID success of sorts, and a farmers' protest, and the new form of protest that's coming in. So none of this has gone away. So 2021 starts with a backlog of 2020's unresolved issues. So I would say that it would be over-optimistic to presume that next year is going to be significantly better, or that you left all the bad ideas behind this year, because new forms of protests are being forged in this, both in the CAA and the farmer protests. And the reforms that are done could face a lot of headwinds in the coming year. And the Chinese are waiting for the snow to thaw to see what they might salvage of the stalemate. So I have a feeling we have a tough first half of next year, and there's a new strain of COVID. So even though we have been relatively successful, we still have the fight and the vaccine and rollout and the huge political atmosphere of next year, where Bengal, Assam, Punjab, all going to the polls. So I think I predict at least the first half of 2021.
Politically hot, what are the takeaways? We saw what happened in Bihar, despite, we talk about a long lockdown, reverse migration, the BJP and Nitish Kumar still won it. But do you think COVID will have an impact in the coming elections, or now that's done away with and it's back to politics as usual?
No, I think by and large, we have done well in COVID so far, despite all the Cassandras. If you look at it, just in one day, US and Europe have over 300,000 new infections. Our total active cases are far below 300,000. That gives you a scale of our achievement over the last 9 months. And even with the new strain, I think we'll be able to cope with it. And with the vaccine rollout, we should do better. It is the politics that's going to heat up, because the farmer protests, I think the last round of talks is just underway as we are speaking. But we don't know what will come of it. Both sides have stuck into it. I think the government has at least made some concessions, but the farmers don't seem to be any more to make any concessions. So
maybe with some good reason, you and I will agree to disagree on that. But Veer, on the political front, how do you see the coming year?
I think the story of the last year will be tested again next year. The story of the year that we're just coming to an end with was the story of Mr. Modi. He had two huge challenges thrown at him. The first one was the economy. I think most people will concede the economy was in trouble before COVID. It got much worse, as is inevitable because of COVID. And the other thing was how he handled COVID, not just the medical way, but the way in which the migrant workers were handled, the way in which a lockdown was called with a few hours' notice. These are reverses that would have sunk many prime ministers. Mr. Modi actually seems to have thrived on them. COVID has been used as an excuse to explain away any earlier economic failures. And the general attitude is, yes, the economy may be doing badly, but so is the global economy. What do you expect when COVID is around? And on the second issue, which is slightly more complex, on the handling of COVID, we've been lucky in that, for some reason, there are many different theories about it, COVID doesn't seem to be as fatal to Indians as it does to, say, Europeans or Americans. So even when we hadn't controlled the number of total COVID cases, we were okay, generally speaking, on the deaths. And as Jaggi says, now if you look at the figures, we seem to have done okay, assuming the British strain, which we are all talking about, does come to India or spread All that we can know about it is that it's much more easily transmissible, but it's no more virulent. So yeah, your numbers may go up, but I don't think it'll affect the deaths. So in terms of COVID, I think Mr. Modi's actually gained. And what is more surprising is that opinion pollsters tell us that many of the Bihari migrant workers who went back, walked for miles and were destitute, actually voted for Mr. Modi. For some reason, they blamed Nitish for their problems, but they did not blame Mr. Modi. So both of these would have sunk any other prime minister. I think Mr. Modi has triumphed over. And as Jaggi mentioned, because he seems overwhelmingly popular with the majority, the protests that are coming from minorities. Punjab farmers, people who feel affected by the CAA, and they're not taking place really in parliament because the opposition is irrelevant. They're not taking place in the electoral battlefield. They're taking place on the streets. So the thing to look out for is, will that increase in the coming year?
Has opposition been outsourced, Kaveri? You know, we've seen the streets are more active and more this thing than the politicians themselves in the opposition. State of the opposition in the coming year.
In many ways, Priya, I think the Prime Minister's call for Atmanirbharta is actually translated into complete abandonment of everyone, and it's really each man or each woman to himself, I feel. And what's happened is, in that scenario, you also have this rise of the street protests, which you had at the beginning of the year. And you will continue to see more of this. This resistance, which actually began with JNU, with the Central University, Hyderabad, these pockets of resistance will grow, and they will not come from a political structure. They will come from students. They will come from farmers. You can call them minorities, but they will be visible. They will be vocal, and they will want to be heard. Now, I feel that, India sort of I think we have to look at India not just as a series of elections, which we have tended to do so far, but you have to look at it as a democracy in action all the time. And when you look at that, then you feel really that the opposition, as we all know, has failed. And I feel that 2021 is the year that we really should metaphorically bury the Gandhis and find an alternative to them in the Congress, or I think the Congress is going to be in big trouble. And we will find increasingly more protests, more resistance from outside the political structure. And we should also, I think, not take these state elections so seriously, although I think West Bengal will be hugely virulent, and I think you will see a whole lot of violence, physical, psychological, of all kinds. And I think more than that, what I feel is that the middle class and the general citizenry of the country, Veer was talking about how the Bihari migrant seemed to have voted for Modi. I think what the general citizen of this country has realized, that really the government can't do much for them. So that whole idea of Pakoda economy that the Prime Minister talked about has actually come to be. We are actually now a nation of digital nomads. People who work with their minds are digital nomads. People who work with their hands are, physical migrants. And we'll see more and more of that. People will look at the gig economy. They will look at entrepreneurship. I think the whole which I think is going to be a good thing in the long run. The dependence on the Sarkar as Mai Baap, I think, is going to be eroded completely. I feel that in the long run is going to be very good for India.
Not sure about that. Dheeraj is here. Dheeraj, the economics part, given the fact also what's happening with the farm bills, is this government emboldened to carry out more reforms, or is he going to go back? The budget is coming. Will that be lots more SOPs, lots more doles, or will it be finally we see some big picture budget happening?
Well, frankly, I don't see, even through this period of crisis, there haven't been that many SOPs and doles. In fact, contrary to what most economists recommended, much bigger stimulus and much more spending, the government has been quite restrained. So I don't see any.
But that's all they've done is SOPs and doles.
No, but let me be contrarian here. I think it's going to be a bad year on the economic front, and I agree with Veer that there were things on the economy were not looking good even before COVID struck. But I think my view is that the government hasn't wasted the crisis. In fact, if you look at the worst year of economic performance before this one in the last 3 decades, you'll be surprised. The year is 1991, when the economy grew only 1%, right? Before that was 1979 when we had negative growth. So the worst year in the last 40 years before this one was 1991. And how do we remember 1991 now? 1991 is viewed only with positive connotation. In fact, that whole period between 91 and 93, at least from the economic history perspective, is viewed as, the period which unleashed India's potential. You transform from socialism. And that was a period, by the way, of a lot of political and social upheaval. There was the Babri Masjid demolition. There were the bomb blasts in Bombay. There was a whole lot of things happening. And the economy was miserably placed. Now, it led to something better, but that particular point in time wasn't great. So I think history will also, economic history at least, will judge this to 2020 slightly more positively than we are looking at now, because I think the government has used it. I hope they stick to their guns on the farm bill despite the protests, because I think this is what will transform agriculture. And agriculture is one sector of the economy untouched by reform in the last 30 years. I think they've also given a renewed focus to manufacturing, which I think is the second most important sector, which has not prospered in the last 30 years. They've rolled out production-linked incentives. You may call it a SOP, but I think that's what's going to get industry and manufacturing forward. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want jobs coming in the future, if you want growth coming in 2021, 22, 23, and from now on, services is not going to do all the heavy lifting. It's done it for 30 years. So you need agriculture to grow. You need manufacturing to grow. And I think in hindsight, some of the reforms that have been initiated, and I hope 21 will continue to see them. Labor reforms have been done. Coal monopoly of Coal India was ended. Private trains in the railways to be allowed. I hope Air India gets sold in the first quarter of 2021. That I think will be truly historic if it happens. So I think a lot of interesting things happening on the economic front. And I think the government, the conventional wisdom should be that you do reform in good times, right? In most countries, it's the good times when difficult decisions are taken. In India, we take difficult decisions in bad times. That's just the way we do it. Whether it's the 60s, agricultural reforms, whether it's in 1991, whether it's now. So I think, again, difficult times have led to certain bold decisions. We have to see how many more bold decisions follow, because every government has only limited political capital. So, given the backlash to the farm reform, I don't know how many more difficult reforms they can do. But say if they do a few privatizations, and as I said, they've already done labor, they'll stick to the guns on farm. I think you will see this 20 years from now as the year in which the economy took a second turn. So it was slowing down before COVID came. There was desperate action needed, desperate reform needed, and COVID has actually forced the government to focus on the economy. And my view is that because of COVID, we have taken certain structural reforms which may not have happened otherwise, because we always delay it for a difficult day. So I think in hindsight, this year might turn out to be better. It won't ever be better in the sense there was misery, death, sickness, all of that will be there. But, if it leads to something better, then it will have a more favorable view from historians.
Politically speaking, Jaggi, what about the opposition? Basically, we are saying there's really no challenger to Prime Minister Modi, but we are also seeing some movement in the opposition. Sharad Pawar is making noises. Do you think UPA may be taken over by somebody other than the Congress as the UPA chairperson?
It's high time somebody has to over both the UPA and the Congress. Because the Gandhi family, they are merely constitutional monarchs who are sitting at the top and resolving some disputes. It's fine. But they're no longer vote pullers, and they're a disaster as far as the Congress is concerned. Anyone inside the Congress will be a better leader. They lose people like Jyotiraditya Scindia, and they would have claimed close to losing Sachin Pilot. All the leaders of the future, they are angry with them. And that's the problem. So I think the opposition space is ripe for change. Sharad Pawar comes on. I don't think Sharad Pawar, unless he merges himself with the Congress, will be made a UPA chairman. But definitely he is a wily old character, so he will make some difference.
There have been examples of a lesser or smaller party heading it. NTR headed the National Front.
See, if you're going to have a bunch of regional satraps collectively banding together to create a party, you will have very bad policy making, but it's a viable thing. But if such a formation does take place, the one good thing they can do is to devolve power to the states. You say, I'm going to do only constitutional amendment. A lot of powers on the concurrent list should be shifted to the states, and from the states to cities and local bodies. If they do that one single point agenda, that this is what we are coming together for. After that, it does not matter who rules Delhi or who rules any state, because by then we would have been sorted in terms of taking decisions, economic decisions at the right level. Currently, every damn thing is taken at the Delhi level, especially large financial decisions. I mean, the whole MSP business is a nonsense. Why should Delhi, the government, union government, be settling prices for the whole country when farming in Bihar is quite different from farming in Punjab or in Kerala? Kerala doesn't even have an APMC yet. So we are talking about a one-size-fits-all kind of policy. Same Food Security Act, same land bills, same everything will be applied now to the whole country. First thing we need to do is dismantle this one-size-fits-all structure. If regional parties come together to ensure just a constitutional devolvement of power, India will be in safer hands. And then it would not matter who actually comes to power in Delhi or in Bombay or in Chennai. That's the problem.
Opposition view. So I think one point is, of course, I think the others are better placed to comment on the Gandhis and the politics and so on. But I think one challenge Mr. Modi has thrown up also to the opposition and to the Congress in particular is that the entire Congress was the sort of monopolist of this welfare politics, what you call SOPs and the delivery to the poor and so on. And that platform, in many ways, Mr. Modi took very clearly in the Modi 1. Bharat or gas cylinders or bank accounts or direct transfers. So I think what is also needed from the opposition is not just a matter of simply replacing a leader, because yes, that may go to some extent, but I think they also need a certain idea and certain set of ideas, coherent ideas on which to take on Mr. Modi. And I think it's not the old idea of just secularism versus Hindutva or a pro-business and he's anti-poor. That's not going to work anymore, because I think his positions are a little more nuanced than that, particularly on the pro-poor front. This is why even in the worst of times, the poor are still with him. There has to be some reason, right? So the delivery of services, he's done that to some extent. So I think it's also the opposition, whether in whatever way they come together, eventually also need a set of ideas or a set of alternate policy. What do they stand for?
Yeah, you can't just be anti-Modi. There has to be a positive narrative also. We are discussing what the year ahead looks for us, and especially in terms of politics, what can the opposition do, or what, there is definitely a vacuum in the opposition space. How do you see it getting filled given the current set of players that are there?
I don't know, Priya. It's a difficult one because we tend, when we talk about the opposition, to focus on personalities. Now, I don't think anybody with any brains can deny that what the Congress has done this year has been a disaster. Rahul Gandhi has resigned, yet he's not resigned. He's still running the Congress. Everyone is leaving. He seems unaffected by this. There's the people who really hate the Congress at the moment are not Sanghis, but are liberals who feel that the Congress has let the side down. But I don't dispute much of that. But the problem, I don't think, is just individuals. I think the problem is one of ideas. What Mr. Modi has done successfully over 6 years is make himself not just Teflon coated, but above politics. You can see that in the way he looks with that long beard and the lofty pronouncements. He's become something of a Rishi Muni, a saint, and we're into the age of the mythological prime ministership in which people worship him and look up to him, and he's seen as being above the fray. It's worked because he's got, I think for the first time since independence, Hindus believing that Hinduism is a valid political platform. It was always a minority platform earlier. It's a serious platform, and people vote for Mr. Modi because of what he represents. Recognition of Hinduism's importance, of the importance of what they call Indic culture, etc. If you are going to fight that, and you're going to have difficulty fighting that because Hindus are 80-something% of the population, and he's managed to weaponize Hinduism. You need to have a better idea. You need to tell people why this is not working. So far, the opposition has not managed to do it. It's easy to say that Rahul is useless, but let's look at Madhya Pradesh, where the Congress did very badly in by-elections recently. In Madhya Pradesh, the Congress has an organization. The Congress had money. In Kamal Nath, they had a very capable leader, and yet he was wiped out by Jyotiraditya Scindia's people. So it goes beyond Rahul being an idiot or whatever the shorthand, political convenient shorthand is. There's a much, much deeper crisis, and it's a crisis of ideology, a crisis of ideas. And unless the opposition comes up with a big idea just by saying Chokidar Chore or whatever, they're going to get nowhere.
And we have talked about this, Kaveri. The opposition needs a story, needs a narrative, in terms of, you can't just say, I'm communal, you're secular. You need to be more nuanced about it also. So they need to get some kind of a narrative going that really appeals to the people, as opposed to Modi's
Yeah, and
narrative.
the universal basic income is clearly not it. It may have won the Nobel Prize for Abhijit Banerjee, but it didn't cut ice in India. But I think the point here, I found that very interesting what Veer was saying. Actually, the age of the mythological prime minister. And I wonder, because 2021 is also the run-up to the UP elections in 2022, which really will be the the litmus test, I suppose, to use a tired old phrase of, how people will vote in 2024.
Mythological chief minister there.
There you have the ultimate man of saffron. And I'm just wondering whether the real challenge to Mr. Modi is not from the opposition, but from within his own party. And will it come from Yogi Adityanath? And that's quite a virulent form of Hindutva, where the other has now been completely, made into a demonic other with this love jihad ordinance. And I wonder how that will play out. And perhaps that is what we should be focusing on. Where does the real opposition to Mr. Modi come from? I do not think it will be from the opposition as we know it. I think it will be a more hardline form of Hindutva. What will win at the end is what I think will be very interesting for India.
Comfortable with the more hardline form of Hindutva. He's been saying he's not, but Jaggi, what is your take into the UP elections also? Because you know what, we went into the election saying the Modi's username is development, but his password is Hindutva. So is he going to carry this on?
A certain amount of soft Hindutva is vital for the BJP because that's what differentiates it from Congress party, right? In fact, even in look at the Congress's own history, the first 15 to 20 years was actually soft Hindutva with socialism, right? That was a Nehruvian thing. If you look at every institution created that, they all had Sanskrit bases. You have Satyam Jayate, Dharmo Rakshati Rakshati. These are the things, Yato, Dharmastato. I mean, everything was Sanskritic and Upanishadic, right?
Gandhi.
So, if you actually see, the early non-conversion laws are all enacted, the anti-cow slaughter laws are all enacted by the Congress government, not BJP, right? So my point is, the BJP is the version of the Congress that was there in the first 15, 20 years of after independence. Today, it is not any more Hindutva than that. Anyway, as far as coming back to one thing, if the opposition wants a big idea, it can only be in decentralization and devolution of power. Once they come together on that, then they have a story to tell. Because in terms of economic ideas, political ideas, none of them has any ideas. Neither the government nor the opposition has an idea about how we are going to really make this economy boom and create millions of jobs. I don't think anybody has an answer. Manmohan Singh had one answer, that is spend thousands and thousands of crores, create double-digit inflation and hope that somebody will get a job somewhere. But during the UPA period, there was no job creation despite high growth. So there's a structural problem in all economies, not just in India. Why do you think an idea like even UBI has been thought of in the West? They know that technology is replacing jobs. You cannot just create jobs by growth alone. The quality of the growth has to be changed. And that nobody has an idea about how to do that. Not Raghuram Rajan, not the Nobel Prize winning economists, none of them has an idea. That is your reality. So if you expect these nincompoops in the opposition to come up with some brilliant idea, I would say only devolution is a good idea because politically it will sell. But everything else, they have no clue on how to lift the economy. Let me tell you that.
The BJP does. I'm not too sure of that.
No, I am not. No, BJP has at least done the right things. They have moved the right reforms. They have created bankruptcy court. They have created higher state capacity to deliver subsidies to the poor. They have created a labor code which is much better than what it was, and their farm laws which are all good. So now we hope there is some payback, but structurally things will not change too substantially even after all these reforms.
But Dheeraj, how does Modi's economics translate into politics? He wins elections, but when he goes for the election, he doesn't really talk about his economics. He goes back to Hindutva. So his economics, even he realizes, are not really
no, that's not entirely true. I mean, in 2019, in fact, a lot of the election was around, what he had delivered to the poor in terms of. So I think people again mistake. I think in the first place they mistake Modi that he is some kind of Margaret Thatcher of India or Ronald Reagan of India. I don't think so. It was never the case.
The Indira Gandhi of India.
he's very, very, he's not even Indira Gandhi. I mean, yes, in terms of the strong leadership, but I think on economic policy, he's fairly pragmatic. I don't think he believes at all what he's accused of, that, he's only pro-business or pro-market. Evidence doesn't suggest that to me. So I think, in fact, his is a more nuanced position, and he's taken away the welfare, which is the point I made earlier also, that opposition as we know it, whether it's Congress or the Congress breakaways, which is largely what Mamta, Jagan, Sharad Pawar, this entire ecosystem, which was basically populist, welfare, socialism, Mr. Modi, I mean, now he's taken this bold move on farm reforms, but before that, which is the one pro-market huge policy you could think of? Not much. And I think in India, again, and this is where I agree with Jaggi, that ultimately the political economy in India, whether it's the government or opposition, it suits them to demonize, or not demonize, but be suspicious of business, of profit. And at the end, if you want jobs, you want growth, government is not going to deliver this, right? It's ultimately going to come from the private sector only. So I think, in fact, I would challenge the opposition if they really want a new idea. I think Mr. Modi has done certain reforms, but a new idea would be to promote private business. Mr. Rahul, otherwise, if you keep going this Adani, Ambani and demonizing various private businessmen, I don't think that's a recipe for growth or progress, and people are not going to buy it. So you need something more. You need something more, even on the economic front. There is space. The point is that you're talking about political space, but there is space even on the economic front for ideas. But somebody has got to get out of that old. The problem is our politics is still stuck in the in terms of the economic thinking, is still stuck in the past. So I think there's no.
The last word, Veer, the economics, I don't think is going to, the story is not going to take a long time coming. The elections are going to be fought again on what? Divisiveness. We have 3 state elections coming up.
Well, if you look at, there are different elections, but if you look at Bengal, the problem there is not necessarily the BJP suddenly become popular. The problem is that Mamta has been in power for a very long time. There's huge anti-incumbency against her. The left has collapsed. The Congress no longer exists. The BJP is taking the anti-incumbent vote. Mamta is trying to fight that by saying they're outsiders. They're saying we're not outsiders, we're Hindus, she's Muslim. So every election, I think, has its own story. I think what we need to look for in the next year is what Kaveri said, not necessarily electoral politics, but the politics of the street, the politics of interest groups and minorities who feel hard done by the majoritarianism of the government. The fact that majoritarianism wins you elections doesn't help you run India. How Mr. Modi will handle that remains to be seen. And Kaveri also said that there will be a threat at some stage to this run a Hindutva kind of, a soft Hindutva kind of policy at the center and let the states do hard Hindutva. Because you have to keep convincing your followers, if you're the mythological prime minister, that you're dedicated to Hindus. So you will discreetly look away when a lunatic idea like love jihad becomes legislation. You will allow CAA, NRC. You will frame the Kashmir issue in Hindu-Muslim terms, in India-Pakistan terms. You will portray dissidents as Khalistanis and Pakistanis. It will be done at a lower level. It won't be done Mr. Modi's level because he will be above the fray. But at some stage, he's going to have to confront this. Is he going to go along with this? Is he going to disavow it? I don't think he's ever thought how far he's going to go. But in the next year or so, he'll have to either take the jump or stop jumping.
Okay, I know Jaggi wants to come in, but I'm totally out of time now.
No, it's
So
okay.
21 is, I'll come back to you for another show, Jaggi. Totally out.
No. I had nothing to say.
21 is a trailer to 22, Priya.
22 is, which election is in 22.
Yes.
But let's see if is 21 going to be the year of change. Well, not from the BJP side. Why will Modi want to fix, when the wheel is not broken, he's not going to fix it. Change, if there is, should be coming from the opposition, or else the opposition will be outsourced perhaps to the streets, as we are seeing happening with our farmers right now. But that's it for now. We wish you a very happy new year. And that's it. And thank you for watching this show.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.